Good morning. Thank you for joining us for today's coffee talk. My name is Sean O'Brien, president of QuickRate, and as always, I'm pleased to be joined by Steve Huntington. Steve, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us this Friday for our December edition of the Coffee Talk for CECL. My name is Steve Huntington. I'm Director of Analytics here at QuickRate, and I've spent about half my career here working with Sean.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Just a reminder, we will send out a link to today's recording along with a copy of the slides. Throughout the discussion, I see we already have a question come in. Use the Q&A box or the chat feature, and we'll monitor those throughout the discussion and either ask the question at an appropriate pause, or as I tend to do, I'll just interrupt Steve and we'll plow through with the questions. So we will. All right, so we got a question, so we'll take that one here in a second. Noted it, but we'll take those throughout. So please go ahead and submit those. As usual, we'll start with a few polling questions. We have a few fun ones today. We'll go ahead and show you and get started with, and then we have a couple of a little bit more serious questions. But given the holiday season, there's always the annual debate around Christmas movies. One, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? And secondly, is Gremlins a Christmas movie? So just thought we'll start off with those this morning. Let's give this another 15 seconds or so.
This is why we're here today, people. So everything's downhill from this on. So please focus.
The important questions that we all must know. All right, so we'll go ahead and end this one. Pretty evenly split. Die Hard, yes, 54 to 46%. Gremlins, a tie, 50-50.
All right.
So, all right, well, thank you for participating. We'll go on to the next question, somewhat related, just favorite Christmas movie. So we've got a long list here. It's a Wonderful Life, Miracle on 34th Street, Christmas Carol, Christmas Story, Rudolph, Christmas Vacation, Charlie Brown Christmas, Die Hard, Elf, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Home Alone, Love Actually.
Something for everybody there.
Gremlins, yes.
Something for everyone other than just insert generic Hallmark movie here. You know, that would that'd have been a good choice as well.
That's right.
They all have the same plot anyway, right? So it really doesn't matter which one.
Repackaging. All right, so we got a pretty good horse race going here. We'll give it another 15 seconds to see if a winner can prevail. Well, interesting. All right, we're going to go ahead and end this one. Looks like we have a tie.
You guys got it right.
I think Christmas Story, won it. Christmas Story with a late close to win it. Followed closely by Home Alone.
I don't see the results on there. They didn't pop up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't share them. Sorry.
There we go.
I was looking at I was keeping it for myself. Christmas Story at 19%. A slight winner over Home Alone and It's a Wonderful Life. So again, thank you all for participating. Just a couple more now. Really, again, kind of a follow-up to last month's. You know, what areas of, if any, would you like greater support in your CECL process? As we look forward to 25 and continuing these, we want to make sure they remain relevant and helpful. So, certainly appreciate any comments you want to make here. We'll give this some time to put in there, and then have one sort of follow-up related question as our final question for today. So. Okay, thank you for participating and sharing that. We'll go ahead and end that one. And then our final question is around improvements to the tool. So again, a little bit of a longer answer, just how would you improve CECLSolver? So Steve and I, and certainly our team, try to continually evaluate the tool to see what we can do to make it easier to use, more comprehensive, but certainly want to make sure that's in sync with what you're looking for, perhaps something that you see in the tool that we could all benefit from. We certainly welcome that feedback as we try to continue to improve the tool as we move into 25. Which is hard to believe we're going to be a quarter way through this next century.
I hadn't thought about it like that until just now, Sean. Thanks. Wait for the existential crisis to set in on a Friday afternoon.
All right. Again, thank you for participating, and we'll get those shared and stopped so we can get those, and we'll move on with the rest of the presentation. Let's just jump in on this question, Steve, before we get going.
Yeah.
We are in the process of adding business and commercial lending, so we don't have any history of losses. What would your suggestion be to begin reserving for new products?
Yeah, there's a bunch of ways, different thoughts I have as to how that might be handled in different aspects of CECL. But of course, we'd start by looking at peer loss rates, right? By looking at, since it's not something that you have a history of lending, or obviously no history of losses, I would have a lot of guidance come from what the peer experience has been from a loss perspective. I know a lot of those business lines and commercial lines are ones that don't have a long history of really rich data on the NCUA's call reports. And so it could be, somewhat challenging to find really good peer data on losses on the commercial side. There is some, our database does have some of that data. I can see here a lot of non-zero values for commercial loans and lines. So I would start there. Big question obviously is, we're using the WARM method. So all of our historical or our lifetime loss calculations are going to be driven by what the remaining life on average is of the loans in your portfolio. You don't have any yet, so so I would be using WARM values from that you also get from either our other CECLSolver users or from the NCUA itself. But I would suggest that we're going to need to modify some of those WARM values in order to account for the fact that all of the loans in your portfolio will be pretty much brand new, right? So you won't have an average remaining life of your loans that is equal to an institution that has an existing portfolio, right? A mature portfolio. So it's something that we can talk about one-off if you'd like to give us a buzz. But my suggestion is using the peer loss data and taking the default WARMs and maybe adding 50%, not quite doubling, but maybe almost doubling some of the WARMs, just because you're going to have a longer average life of your loans than the remaining loans on a mature institution's books. Does that make sense, Sean?
Yeah, and I think certainly reach out. We probably can give you some other suggestions, even to potentially even utilizing the add-in tool to maybe even build create some more information.
Yeah.
Second question, Steve came in. What can we give our auditors for WARM support? By
WARM support, meaning just, the first question I have is whether if you're calculating your WARMs, if you're using our default values from the NCUA or from our proprietary user data database, or if we are calculating your WARMs for you. So that's something, if you're not doing, that's something that we do offer. It's a separate fee, but we do offer to get your loan level data and calculate your WARMs for you. And obviously, if we did that, we would have all the data to share with an auditor as far as how the WARMs were calculated and the methodologies and everything else. I assume that's not the background for why you would ask that question. So if you're not calculating the WARMs, so you can't share with them your methodology, or you're not using our template, our Excel template for it, which we can also offer, then you're probably using one of our default values. And I can share, or we usually do on our calls here, on our webinars, how robust our proprietary database for WARM data is, from that we have, over 400 credit unions from 43 states now that have run 10,000 or so scenarios with over 100,000 data points. That would be the kind of information that they're looking for to make sure that if you're using that proxy warm data from other institutions, that it is a robust enough database. If you're using the NCUA's values, which are actually pretty close to ours in most cases, we can share where that comes from on the NCUA's website. But we have some details on it in our warm estimator tool. But the NCUA calculates, hires a third-party statistical data provider that every quarter updates and calculates prepayment values and industry average warm values, warms that are adjusted for prepayments and amortization, just like ours are. And it comes from a robust set of smaller credit union loan level data and industry data that they update on a quarterly basis, and we provide that as part of our warm estimator tool. So there's some different ways that we can help you out with that, depending upon what your situation is, how you're getting it, and how you're doing it right now, and if there's anything in particular that they're asking for.
Great, and certainly follow up with us and or David or Jason if you need any additional support. Follow-up question to the first question is, what is the look back period in the model? Steve, you want to take that?
So yeah, our look back periods by default are tied to the warm value. So if you have let's say you have a 7-year warm for your mortgage portfolio, by default, we're going to use a 7-year look back period for that particular segment. Every segment has its own individual and unique look back period. So you can customize the look back periods for each segment of the portfolio using the CECLSolver. They default to a look back period that equals the warm. So if you have a portfolio of longer duration loans, then we're looking back longer in history to get a feel for how they perform over a lifetime. Whereas if you have a construction loan or a much shorter term loan, then we don't need to look back quite as far into history to get a feel for how they perform over a lifetime. That is a subjective decision that we made in designing our tool that we discussed with the NCUA and with auditors and examiners. But you could also choose to say, hey, I want to use this 6-year look back period for everything across the board, 6-year look back period. You could choose that as well. So you can fully customize your look back period for the whole portfolio or for each segment individually. But again, we typically default to one that matches the duration of the warm. And most of our users stick with that default, and we've gotten nothing but positive feedback from on the regulatory and accounting side from using that as a assumption.
Great. Another question came in. Examiners have suggested that we build more of a matrix for qualitative factors that are tied to real data. Thoughts on how that can be done within the tool, or do we need to come up with a separate workbook tracking to build that?
I would say the answer is yes. No, we have. I would suggest if you want a more robust framework for qualitative factors than what we have in the tool right now, we have an Excel template that we call the Q factor support matrix, and it is just the beginning of, or the framework for a way to kind of track and quantify qualitative factor adjustments and do it, kind of each time you run a scenario. It's something that you can take, modify, make your own, save it, and add in whatever additional data that you'd like to take into account for it. So you can find that on our knowledge base. If you click on our knowledge base, it'll pop up a whole new page that pops up, and you'll see Q factor decision support matrix or support matrix, and it's just a standalone Excel file that just gives you a suggestion of, hey, this is how you might look at it with a little more granularity by qualitative factor adjustment and by segment, where you can, add points for relatively more risk you see going forward or relatively less risk. And you can sort of define or quantify what you mean by more risk or relatively less risk. And so that would be the beginning of it. And you could pull some real data into that to help justify some of the assumptions in there. We didn't want to build it out too much because everyone's situation is going to be different. But that is kind of a raw framework and template that you can build upon and use if that's helpful.
Yeah, and I would just add, Justin, certainly reach out to us on a follow-up if you want to talk more about this. But that matrix is something I have used as a director in a small community bank for over 15 years, and so we know it has stood the test of time with regulators on the bank side. So happy to talk to you about that more. You know, again, reach out to David or Jason. They can set up a time if you need to talk more about that. But that was the idea there. Steve indicated, try to just to give you a framework that quarter to quarter, you can tie a little to harder data. So, and again, it's a good consistent framework for Q factors for quarter to quarter. Okay. Moving on then to start what we'll discuss. Again, a lot of slides familiar. Always want to kind of keep you up to date to updates and enhancements that we're making. Always a reminder that these enhancements and updates are optional. They do not impact the calculation, but are designed to, again, give you more information, give you context, hopefully make maybe something more streamlined or efficient. But Steve, anything you want to add on this page?
No, most of these we have touched on at one point or another. A few of them we're going to show in a little bit more detail on the following slides today. But yeah, nothing off the top of my head to mention yet.
Good. All right. So first up is, again, one of those tools that we've designed or added to try to, again, give you more information as you're working through CECLSolver. It's a video resource library we call Helpful Hints. Steve, you want to talk through this?
Yeah, so this is something we put together where we have created a bunch of short videos. Short is a relative term, of course. Some are longer than others. And a lot of them, not all, but many of them come from previous coffee talks that we have done in the past, since we've done a lot of these at this point, Sean. So we have a large amount of video where we've discussed so many of the relevant topics that we continue to get questions about or customization requests about. And so we decided to kind of formalize and organize some of those snippets into a video resource library, and then put each of those, the videos that pertain to a particular section of CECL right within that section on the tool. So if you click on the loan portfolio summary, then there's going to be a couple helpful hint videos that pertain to questions you might have about rounding or lifetime look back period multipliers, stuff like that. When you click on the historical analysis, there's a video that discusses customizing look back periods, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can get those helpful videos throughout the tool where you'd have the question as you navigate it. And then if you click on the helpful hints right on the blue kind of header up there, it'll give you a pop-up that has kind of a comprehensive list of all the videos that we have so far. I believe that's in the next slide.
Yep.
Yes, there it is. So that pop-up will show up, and that kind of shows you all the ones that we have right now. We'll be adding significantly to this library. Yeah, you can click on any one of them there as well.
Yeah, and again, as Steve indicated, the idea here was just to give you, as you're working through the tool, to not break your momentum. Again, just information about what's happening on the page, maybe address common questions we've received on a particular page, as something you could do immediately. And then if you're still looking for additional information, certainly reach out to the support team or sales team for help. We had another question come in, Steve. Is there a way to lock a scenario? And
yeah, so there's depends on exactly what we mean by that. The tool is designed to, once you save a scenario, that none of your inputs or assumptions or the historical data that went into the actual CECL calculations changes. Now, what that means is if you pull up a scenario that you ran from 9 months ago, the historical lifetime loss rate, the Q factors, all your notes, the current loan balances as of when you did the calculation, all of your individually assessed loans, all of that information should stay exactly as it was when you last saved it. So that should be locked, and the actual CECL values for historical reference should all be exactly as you left them. The only thing that will update is on our historical analysis tab, you will see some updated financial columns that have newer historical data since you saved that scenario. That data is not taken into account in your calculations, though. It's just there as a reference point, because the most common use case by far for our tool is for people to open up last quarter scenario, right? Update it directly from the old scenario. So shift the look back period to start taking into account the new data, update the loan balances, tweak the Q factors, and then resave it as a new scenario. that's a use case or a workflow that wouldn't be possible if your last quarter scenario was locked and couldn't accept updated financial industry data from the call reports and the peer data and everything else. So the way we sort of split the difference between those is making sure that a saved scenario, all of the calculations and data that's used in the CECL modeling is exactly as it was when you saved it. But you will see on the historical tab, and the peer tab, you'll see some additional columns of financial data. They won't be part of a look back period. They won't be calculated in your CECL, but they'll just be there for reference if you want to use that old scenario to update it to include that new data and then resave it. So I don't know if that's a convoluted answer, but I'm happy to, if you want to give us a buzz, I'm happy to pull up your scenario, your old scenario for you and kind of walk you through what you're seeing and why it is historic. The CECL calculations are historically accurate and remain so once you save the scenario, but updated data can be integrated if you want to update it and then resave it as a new one.
Perfect. So secondly, we've touched on this before, but and obviously you've seen it, but we want to just, again, reemphasize kind of why we did this tab reorganization. So Steve, here again, you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, we just kind of we've added some new bells and whistles and some additional peer data and everything else to our tool, and wanted to keep it as keep the flow as intuitive as possible. So with all of our tabs on the CECL tool there, we did a slight kind of color-coded reorganization to keep them flowing as you would use the tool, right? The overview tab is a very quick and dirty summary of what your reserve looks like from your current scenario compared to the most recent quarter end or a previous quarter end if you want to roll back the clock. The primary kind of financial summary of CECL is in the loan portfolio summary tab. That's where all that data is kind of aggregated and organized and summarized. The historical analysis is the more deep dive into the historical, and then you work on Q factors, individually assessed loans. None of those tabs have changed. They're all still right there. Then we've kind of have unfunded commitments and held maturity securities, which are, I don't know if they're not ancillary, right, to CECL, but they're not as primary as working with the existing loan portfolio. And then our peer data tab is now just called a public peer data tab, because if you guys remember, we've been sharing that all those the CECLSolver user trends, right, showing you how the WARMs are changing on a quarter-to-quarter basis and how the Q factors are changing and how the reserves are changing for all of our hundreds and hundreds of credit union CECLSolver users. We realized, we had a lot of really good data. We had a very robust database of user data, and we wanted to be able to share that information. Because a lot of it is not public, right? There's although the NCUA now has a tool that provides some default, we just discussed, some default WARM data and whatnot on the industry as far as what direction Q factors are headed in and reserves at the segment level and what direction they're headed in. There is no good public database that has that kind of information. But since we got a good chunk of credit unions using the tool now, we can share that internal data with you guys. So that's called the CECLSolver user trends. That has been around for a few months now, and it was kind of buried a little bit in the knowledge base, but we wanted to bring it right out front so you could find it easier. And so it's that last tab now there as well. And I'll show it to you guys again in a few minutes on my screen, but not quite yet.
Perfect. Yeah, again, just to reemphasize again, we just felt like, with the 3 separate reserves, just better organized, kind of the workflow, the loan portfolio, the unfunded commitments, and then the held to maturity securities. So that was our thinking there. To the point about just additional data, here's something, Steve, I think that you want to touch on.
Yeah, so we've been looking for, one of the things that we hear often from our customers is, the more information you can give us to help us defend and justify qualitative factor adjustments, right? They're asking us to project long-term losses in the future, forward looking, in order to calculate an appropriate reserve as of today. And so that requires a lot of subjectivity. It requires some prognostication, some sort of stance on where you think the economy and your loan portfolio health are going in the looking forward. And so we've been looking for good sources consistent sources of some economic trends or projected economic trends. And the best stuff that we've been able to find that had a long-term history consistently, and then projected out a reasonable period into the future, actually comes from the Federal Reserve. Once a year, they do this big stress testing expectations or requirements document that they type up and send out to the largest institutions around the country that have to do those DFAST stress tests once a year. And included in that very voluminous document, they handed out there's a table that has a handful of economic time series that have very long-term storied histories, right? Quarterly data points going back 20 years. And then they got together a group of their best economists or economists from around the country and created a couple forward-looking projection models on all those time series, on all those economic series. So I presented that here, kind of faithfully recreated it from the Federal Reserve. The first part is just those historical data points going back in time quarterly, like 20 years or so. And then the first scenario that we call the baseline scenario, those are the actual midpoint economic projections. So the things that the economists on average think will happen or most likely to happen. Then there's a severely adverse scenario. That is not an economic projection. That is a hypothetical, severely adverse or almost worst case, but somewhat, not completely Armageddon, hypothetical scenario that those same economists with the Fed put out there. So whether you use this to help justify qualitative factor adjustments or whether you use it to help kind of stress your portfolio a little bit to get a feel for if things were to go in the wrong direction, what kind of losses might be out there, and sort of balance your Q factors somewhere in between a baseline conservative actual projection and how bad it could get under certain circumstances. We just thought having these data series at your fingertips would be really helpful. So that's why we added it in there. It is in the knowledge base. There's a big green button right in the knowledge base, or blue button, just called Federal Reserve Economic Scenario Indicators.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Coming soon.
Coming soon. Yeah. In that same vein of helping with looking outside your own history to help project what you think is going to happen with losses and then have a defensible reserve is obviously the peer data that we have shared in the past. So the peer data right now is there's only one way to get it, right? It's just we just do average loss rates for your peer group over time, and it is not very flexible. All that it is, it certainly adjusts as you type in different warms and look back periods, right? It matches the warms and look back periods of your historical data. But a lot of times you get a lot of zeros in there, and it can be not particularly helpful in some circumstances, depending upon what peer group you're using and how geographically wide or tight you've chosen to go, state or region or nationally. A lot of those peer data points on average can be somewhat helpful or somewhat not helpful. So we wanted to give another alternative to that. So what we're going to be doing is adding another methodology to look at the peer data. And this one is by percentile rank. So instead of doing sort of a weighted average or an average loss, median loss type method, this is a percentile rank, meaning that if you've got a lot of zeros in your peer data and you're trying to get a feel for whether losses are getting worse or getting better, it's hard to do when there's a bunch of zeros at the median, right? So if you can plug in, let's say, the 75th percentile loss rate or the 90th percentile loss rate, get really punitive and see not only how high losses are in your peer group at the 75th or 80th percentile, but also what direction those losses are headed in, right? Whether your more risk oriented peers are seeing higher losses or than they were 2 years ago, or lower losses are all really good directional helping points to help with qualitative factors and adjustments. So you'll be able to plug in any percentile rank that you want, and the entire peer data will recalculate to show not average or median values, but whatever that percentile rank is. Obviously, the higher the percentile rank, the higher the loss rate. And you can do it for the whole portfolio in one foul swoop, or you can choose a segment of your portfolio to stress more, or to choose a higher percentile rank than others. Right now, what you see here is just a screenshot of it. These the loan segments here happen to be from commercial banks, because that's the template that we were using for our draft, was using the commercial bank segments, but this obviously will be built for credit unions for you guys. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really exciting thing. Again, going to give you more context, give you more information about just, again, as Steve indicated, not only averages in where the median is, but now being able to hone in at a percentile rank, right? You can be more punitive and just kind of see directionally, potentially, where things might be headed. And so it is. It's, you know, the best thing about it, going back to an earlier question from Justin, right? Just around real data, right? This is going to be real objective, you know, data that you can use and incorporate as you're thinking about your Q factors.
Because we still have a lot of institutions that have, like, say, hey, I've had no losses on, you know, on this whole segment for the last 7 years. And even my peers have had no losses on average on this segment for the last 7 years. So my historical shows 0. Any Q factor adjustment from the peer data is also kind of 0. And yet they're still expecting me to end up with a 50 basis point, 75 basis point reserve on this segment. And I'm trying to come up with that 50 to 75 basis points all through subjective Q factors without any help from the other peers around me. This is a way to say, hey, let's bump it up to the 90th percentile, just so we can see if there are some losses amongst your, you know, riskier peers in that segment, and if those losses are getting worse or getting better over the last few years. So that's kind of the point.
Exactly. Much, you know, add some objectivity to the subjectivity.
Yeah.
Okay. So we didn't touch on this one yet. Just
no, we have. Well, I think we alluded to it. Yeah,
exactly,
we alluded to it. So that's why the questions are so great right at the beginning. We jump right on it. So this is some more, this is adding a little richness to the discussion earlier about warm values. And these are the default ones from the NCUA. I did not update this for this quarter. This is a couple quarters old, but in our warm estimator tool, if you open up our warm estimator tool, the Excel link from our knowledge base, you will find the updated version of this data, of the NCUA data. It's updated every quarter. So we do have the 930 that gets updated pretty much the first day of the quarter now. So the 930 data was available on like October 1st. And so the 1231 data will be available before you're even working on your call reports, which will be great. If you can open up that Excel file, we'll have it updated soon after that. But as we mentioned, that the NCUA does their own, well, no, sorry, they contract out to a third-party statistical aggregator type firm to do this study and update it each quarter with warm values by the call report segment that fit in very nicely with our tool, and also prepayment rate assumptions based upon real data. So a lot of you are using our or sending us your loan data, and we're helping you calculate your warms, but you still have to plug in some sort of a prepayment rate assumption in there. The default ones that we use are the ones here from the NCUA. But if you're calculating your own warms using our template or using your own template, and the only piece of the puzzle that you don't feel like is really objective are the prepayment assumptions that you're using, this is really good objective industry peer prepayment assumptions coming directly from the NCUA. So they're going to be hard pressed to really give you a lot of negative feedback on using their own data against them. Not against them, but you know what I mean. So this is something that we update quarterly. And if you're new to the tool, or you want to run a scenario before you've kind of gone through the process of calculating your warms, you can pre-populate warms with this data each quarter. So right when you go to our tool, on the loan portfolio summary on the warm column, you can click on the pre-populate button right there, and you can choose, hey, I want to see the NCUA default warm guidance numbers for 930. And you can click on those, and then the entire tool will recalculate using those default warms from the NCUA. You can also pre-populate it with our proprietary database, our CECLSolver user warm averages from the last quarter as well, which is also very timely. And if we had 5 or 10 institutions using this tool, I would say, no, we don't have enough data in order to share what our users are averaging from a warm standpoint. But since we have a few hundred using it now, then we do have a really robust data set with hundreds of thousands of data points, probably over 1 million now, honestly, that really can give you some good guidance on warm values. And if you'll notice, if you look at the NCUA's warm guidance and our CECLSolver user averages, they're pretty close in most cases as well. They're relatively certainly in line with each other. So
perfect. Thanks, Steve. And so to that point, again, if you haven't looked at these, user trends and scenario trends that we've been able to, kind of aggregate and capture and share with you, highly encourage it. Is again, it gives you valuable information about warms, Q factors, and ACL levels. But more importantly, does it at the median and also potentially show you the 25th and 75th percentile. So Steve, you want to talk about this page?
Yeah, this is on our tool now. Now it's right on one of the tabs. It's that last tab on the CECLSolver, the gray tab called CECLSolver User Trends. And this is just from all of our proprietary data, which I'll share with you in a second. You can look at median warm values by segment, median Q factor values by segment, and then also the collective pool ACL to loans for the collective pools, not for the individually assessed loans. And you can look not only at medians, but 25th percentiles and 75th percentiles. So you can get a good range of where all of your peers are coming in from a warm Q factor and collective pool ACL values from our users. And the next slide, I think, just gives you an idea of the universe. So over 450 credit unions are in that database now, are actively using our tool from 45 states. That's right. I think it's 47. We don't have Alaska yet. So if anyone knows credit union in Alaska, please give us a call. I'd love to bump that number up. We do have Hawaii. Institutions from less than 10 million in assets, even the guys that are at a size range where they don't technically have to use CECL to comply with to calculate a reserve value, all the way up to over $7 billion in total portfolio. And so are averaging around $250 million in assets. Over 5,300 scenarios have been run by our users over the last couple of years, with over 110,000 segment level scenarios run for warms and Q factors. So when I show you those data points and I show you those ranges where our users are coming in, it's not based on a handful of data points. It's based upon this is, I would say, probably a more robust. I don't know who the NCUA uses or exactly what their universe of institutions that they use to calculate their data, but ours probably has more data points in it. But they're both really good resources for sure.
Absolutely. And yeah, we're proud of all of you, being subscribers, but we're, because of that, we do have the ability to share with you what we think is really meaningful and, certainly relevant information about how other credit unions are kind of attacking the CECL issue. Oh, yeah. Justin, thank you very much for the kind words.
And just so that you know, not that I think it makes a huge difference, but the NCUA's default warm and prepayment values, the database that they use, the one thing that they do say about it is that it's from institutions across the country, but smaller credit unions. So it's from credit unions under $100 million in assets. Now, should the prepayment rate on a mortgage loan for a $200 million credit union be different from a $100 million credit union? I would say probably not. So I don't really see a huge relevance there, but it's probably a little bit less relevant as you get to be billions of dollars in assets size-wise. And whereas our database does include data from larger institutions, not that I would expect a huge difference based upon it, but just wanted to point that out as well.
Yep. Next up is, hopefully you don't need to use this, but in the event you're asked in an exam or just maybe an audit, just to potentially validate or confirm some of the calculations that are done in CECLSolver, Steve took on the Herculean task of building essentially a companion Excel tool that allows you to, relatively easily, I'll say, just because of how big this spreadsheet is, and you don't have to build it. to do just that. And so I'll let him talk about his masterpiece he's built.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it a Herculean task. If I was picking a Greek, who's the guy that pushes the rock up the hill and then falls all the way back down and keeps having to push it up and have that guy? Sisyphus? I don't remember what his whoever his name is. You know what I'm. You know what I mean.
Yes.
So this is a tool that is available upon request, specifically for as part of the auditing or validation process. So if you have an auditor or an examiner who has not validated the tool yet, or is not comfortable or hasn't seen enough and wants to see more from that perspective, and says, hey, can you pick a segment of your loan portfolio and show me everything. Show me every single calculation from the historical call report data all the way through to your lifetime loss rate and everything else, so I can just get a better sense of comfort that you have followed, you understand what's happening in this model that you're using, in this tool that you're using, and you check, kind of check. There's no black box here where you don't know what's going in and you can't verify that your call report data is being properly utilized and to calculate accurate historical data and then forward-looking projections for CECL. Now we do have a SOC 1 out there that does verify that we use appropriate data, we're using industry standard calculations, that it's coming properly, that we have controls in place and all that good stuff. But we've been asked a bunch of times from different users who have more picky auditors or examiners to do something more robust. And so we decided that the best way to do that would be to create an Excel file that is a complete recreation or complete comprehensive auditing tool for the historical lifetime loss rates, right? The historical data, all that historical data that goes into CECL, that's like 95% of the financial data that goes in there. It's all these historical balances and losses and everything that goes into that lifetime historical loss rate. Everything after that are just assumptions, right? Q factor assumption, and it's just some kind of basic math. So the most important part of it to validate or audit is the historical element. So if that's something that you're interested in or feel like you need, it is not something we typically see any of our users have to use on a quarterly basis. This is not something you utilize every single time you run a scenario. Usually just upon demand from an auditor or an examiner, when you say, listen, here's a SOC 1, here's the other stuff. We've done some internal and external validation. And they say, yeah, it's all great, not good enough. We demand X. And then you come to us, and then this is what we can provide. So I'm about to pull it up in Excel, and if you'll give me just a second here.
Yeah, and again, as Steve pointed out, right, our hope is you don't need to use this, but if any of our larger credit unions are on the call today, they might be asked to do a little bit more validation work than a smaller credit union. We built this kind of in response to that, just to be able to assist in that endeavor. Again, hopefully you won't need to use it, but it just an FYI that it's there should you in fact be asked to
yeah, this is the ultimate how the sausage is made kind of it's probably too much detail for most of you, but we want everyone to have confidence that not only is everything accurate and correct with how we're doing it, but that you can verify that if you need to. So this is that Excel tool. You'll notice it looks a lot like our historical the historical loss tab, right? We have all your segments of your portfolio, and we have here are all those lifetime historical loss rates, historical loss rates, a aggregate loss rate over the look back period, your look back period, so you can choose and customize look back periods, the lifetime look back multiplier, and then finally, the end of the road, what is your historical lifetime loss rate on each segment of the portfolio? So this is designed to look, and you just pull it up. I update it with your institution, and you plug in your scenario data, like you type in the WARMs that you're using, and then customize the look back periods if you don't want to use the default look back periods. And it looks exactly like this, right? This is what that's designed to look like. Those historical loss rates with the look back periods and the WARMs, and the calculation of the lifetime loss rate, 1.21, 1.34, and those values are what carry to our summary. They're these values, right? The credit union's historical loss rate, which has all that data behind it. So how you get to that using our Excel tool is it takes every single step. Starting with the raw data. This is every single data point from your call report going all the way back in time that is used in the CECLSolver tool. Every single balance for every single segment going back 15 years or more, using the old segmentation and then the new segmentation. You remember when they changed all the segmentation on the call reports 3 years ago, for charge-offs and recoveries, and they went from those memo items, right, like member commercial loan secured by real estate and non-member, to the newer framework, which includes commercial loans secured by multifamily, et cetera, construction and development loans, all that newer segmentation. So we have balances, and every one of these data points is an exact perfect match to a call report data point. There's no manipulation. We're not, quarterlyizing a year-to-date value. These are the call report values. Here are charge-offs. Here are recoveries. That's it. We haven't even calculated a net charge-off ratio. We've just used the call report data points. So to get from your raw call report data all the way through to those lifetime historical loss rates, it's a lot of steps in the middle. That's all the intermediate steps. Every single intermediate step is here. It's all linked directly to the call report data. So, from a gross charge-off and a gross recovery, you have to calculate a net charge-off. And then you have to subtract last quarter's net charge-off so you can get a discrete quarter instead of a year-to-date. Those are the steps that you have to do. And we do each of those steps right here in this long, voluminous spreadsheet. And then finally, it translates to our formatted spreadsheet. This is the one that will perfectly match your interactive CECLSolver tool. And you'll see each historical loss rate linked from the intermediate data. So there's no overrides here. This is all coming directly from the raw data. And if you plug in a warm, everything will recalculate on the fly. Let's say I look at the, let's pick the mortgage loans here. The 1 to 4 family first liens. If I change this 6.57 years to 8 years, it just recalculated the lifetime loss rate. It used an 8-year look back period, which I can customize if I want to. And it calculated a lifetime loss rate of 11 basis points. So these warms here are just what our CECLSolver user averages were for the last quarter. And this institution happens to be Wisconsin, a large credit union in Wisconsin, obviously. And they're one of our guinea pigs that we use for a lot of these presentations. So if I look at these, if I use these warms and I do it as of 9/30, I get 1.21, 1.34, etc. Now, interactive tool. I just opened up a brand new scenario for Wisconsin as if I was Wisconsin. I pre-populated the warms using the CECLSolver user averages from 9/30 and hit apply. So boop, 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 all the same stuff. And you'll notice 1.21, 1.34, 6.69. Those are the lifetime loss rates. They come from here, 1.21, 1.34, or 6.69. And they, if I can drag this over, come on. Here we go. Perfectly match the values here in the Excel tool. So again, it's designed to be a comprehensive auditing validation tool. More of a one-time type tool to satisfy a specific or explicit request from an examiner. Certainly not something you should feel obligated to be doing on any regular basis. And because this is something that you have to get in touch with us and ask us to run. Say, hey, I just did a 9/30 scenario. I'm getting audited on it. Or I'm getting audited on my last year's year end, right? They're in here 9 months after auditing my reserve from 12/31/23. Can you pull up an Excel validation for the scenario I ran last December? It's as of 12/31, and here are my warms. I'll pull up the scenario, I'll plug this data in, and I'll send you this file. And that'll be all you need. Yeah, so that's what this is designed to do. Also, in some cases, if you have a situation where you need custom segmentation and the kind of more blunt tool that we have, the blunt object, so to speak, on our interactive tool, where you can add a custom segment and plug in a historical loss rate for it, a manual one, and plug in a balance and have it be part of a tool. If you need to flesh that out completely with the entirety of the historical data, as if that was a call report line item going back in time, you could come to this tool and run it. And then you can plug in a custom segment and you can type in all this data. You can type in the balances and the charge-offs and the recoveries of that custom segment, going all the way back in time, if you so desire, and then back it out of the call report segment so you're not double counting. And if you were to do that, then this tool would automatically recalculate everything and give you a modified lifetime loss rate for the call report, for the modified call report segment, and for your custom segment. Now that's a lot of legwork, right? So that is not something we suggest for very many of our users, because we don't think it's really, not just because it's hard, but it's time consuming, but it's typically not necessary. If you find yourself in a situation where you can't get out of it, then that's something that this tool can be used for as well. Just know that it'll be some legwork on an ongoing basis from you guys to do that.
All right, Steve, I'm going to take back the screen.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So we covered a lot again today. Appreciate the questions up front to get us started. I thought that was great. If you have any final questions, go ahead and let us know. In the meantime, a reminder, just past videos, webinars, coffee talks are available on our YouTube channel. We will be back in February for another coffee talk. We will be working on, again, content to hopefully, prepare us as we work through 2025. But I think certainly hats off and congratulations to all of you for managing the CECL process here over the last couple of years. Appreciate the feedback this morning to help us again better guide these coffee talks as we go into next year and continue to improve the tools. So we'll look for any additional questions. But Steve, any final comments or thoughts before we let everybody have their day in the weekend?
Nope. I'm sorry I had to go through that whole thing with everyone. I know that was a lot of numbers and a big Excel file, and that's the type of analysis that we hope that for you guys don't have to do, that we can do for you. But we know that specifically with CECL, there's a lot of different customizations and requests out there from institutions, and a lot of auditors who are nervous about it and really want to feel comfortable. So we thought we would kind of get real granular there with you guys just this one time.
Yeah. All right, let me see. There's a couple of nice comments in the chat. Thank you very much for those in the Q&A as well. So thank you all again for attending. You make these coffee talks what they are, so we appreciate it. Steve indicated certainly, appreciate all the feedback and the time spent. Hope everyone enjoys the holiday season. Be safe, have fun. We will see you in 2025. And again, thank you all very much. Have a great day and a great weekend. Thank you all so much. Bye
Thanks,
now.
everybody.